Camera speed.
Sound production, take one.
Action!
Welcome to From Beneath the Hollywood Sign. If you love old movies, Hollywood history, or the golden age of filmmaking, you've come to the right place. This is the podcast that talks about amazing stories of Tinseltown from another era. Hear fascinating conversations with writer-producer Steve Cubine, who quite literally lives just beneath the Hollywood sign, and actress-writer Nan McNamara. Now your hosts, Steve and Nan.
So our listeners, Steve, I think will know that our podcast is based on your blog.
Yes.
Which you started 5 years ago?
I think it was 5 years ago. Yeah.
And the topic that we're going to be discussing today, the person, we were both going back and revisiting your blog, and you had a question about the pronunciation of this person's name.
Yes.
And so you went back to your original blog post, which was over a year ago, and then kind of Googled, and up popped, strangely enough, almost a verbatim ripoff of what you wrote. There's a person on YouTube who plagiarized your blog for their own credit.
They did. It was so
crazy.
Freaky. I was listening to it and I thought, wow, that sounds familiar. Oh, that quote sounds familiar. And so then I pulled up my old blog from, I think it was April 2023, and I started listening and going along. And it's the same material. She stole my material.
Wow. Unbelievable. So in listening to this podcast, if you decide to go research more on your own, just know that the YouTube video that you see out there about this person is stolen, is plagiarized.
Yes. And I just would love to add, I'm always happy that these stories get told.
Yes.
That's one of our mandates. One of the things that we love to do here are tell these stories that maybe people don't know and they're important. But if you're going to tell the story, you know what? Do your own research. Don't be a sloppy journalist. Don't steal people's work. It's not cool.
It's
and
not
you know
cool.
you know who you are.
Yeah. Or even if you're going to do that, give credit where credit is due, which is what we do at the end
Yes.
of our podcast. All the resources that we've used to come up with this information.
But regardless, we do have a fantastic and fascinating episode today.
Yes, once again, this beautiful, lovely actress is someone that I'm excited that we're going to get to share with other people. And her name is DONA DRAKE.
DONA DRAKE. And if you've ever seen that fantastic soap opera of a movie from 1959, Imitation of Life, it's basically the story of this African-American maid played by, in the 59 version, Juanita Moore. And her heart is broken by her daughter, Sarah Jane, who basically turns her back on her mother to live life as a white woman. She's a light-skinned black and she can pull it off. And when I see that movie, I always think of DONA DRAKE because that's exactly what she did.
Right.
When DONA DRAKE was signed with Paramount Pictures, she was put under contract in 1941. You know, the studio always writes this big biography of you to spread to the press and create excitement about their new stars. Well, in her official biography, they said that Drake was born in Mexico City, Mexico, the daughter of Jose and Inocia Novella, lovely Mexican business owners who owned a restaurant. You know, and it just said that she was from Mexican, Irish, and French descent. All very lovely and all bullshit.
Yeah, not true.
Not true at all.
And I think we've talked about this before, where studios will make things up about people.
Yes. But the question that I have, and we're going to talk about her life, and we're going to tell you where she really came from, but did the studio know that DONA DRAKE was African American, and did they just protect her because they saw potential to make money off of her as a star? Or was she able to pull the wool over their eyes, as she did many other people?
Right.
That's a question I have throughout this.
She did go so far as to learn Spanish.
Fluently. I mean, she really created this Latina persona, you know, that I think she carefully cultivated to pass as Latina.
Yeah. Well, tell us about where she was born and what her real name is.
She was born Eunice Westmoreland in Miami, Florida, to Joseph and Novella Westmoreland, a black couple. But as she got more ambitious and she realized she had talent, I think she made the choice to hide her identity as a black woman and create this Latina persona. persona. And it's really sad that that's what she had to do to have any semblance of a career other than playing the maid or the cook or the domestic, things like that.
Right, during that era.
Yes. And even sadder, I think, is the fact that her parents had to sort of go along with it.
Right.
You know, I think they recognized her talent. They realized that she could go somewhere. So they had to basically pretend they weren't her parents. And I have a lot of questions about that, but we'll get into that. Eunice was nicknamed Una, and she was one of 5 children. And so early on, the Westmorlands relocated to Philadelphia when Una was a teenager. They had a restaurant. Una worked in the restaurant for a while, but, you know, her ambition was too much. And so eventually, and this is kind of interesting, she and another waitress named Renee Villian moved to Manhattan along with Mrs. Westmoreland to try their luck at showbiz.
And they formed a sister act, right?
Yes, Renee and Una formed the Villian sisters.
So even then...
she was already starting to
right.
recreate herself and her history
right. Which
and her heritage.
I get. I mean, a sister act is not always real sisters.
Yeah, but it's funny because she went by so many names. I'll just call her Una for this period of her life.
Okay.
Una had this thick, curly hair and these blue-green eyes, so it was very easy for her to pass as Caucasian or Latin.
Okay.
Which, as we'll see, she did quite a bit in her film roles once she got to Hollywood. The girls got a job at the Paradise Club on Broadway, and it was there that she met theatrical producer Earl Carroll. And everyone probably knows Earl Carroll. He had the Earl Carroll Vanities, which was basically tons of beautiful, scantily dressed girls parading downstairs with headdresses and little else.
Right, right.
So he saw her and he hired her for his next show, Murder at the Vanities, which was a big break for her.
Okay. So Carroll being a rival to Flo Ziegfeld.
Yes.
Okay.
Except Flo liked his women classy and more on, whereas Earl knew what the people wanted, I guess.
Well, and you know, it's interesting that she was not, as you say in your blog, not your average chorus girl. So she, besides singing and dancing, which if you're anybody, you know how to do that, right? Back in the day, she played the clarinet.
Yes.
She played the drums. She played the saxophone and the piano, and she spoke fluent Spanish. So the sister act didn't last long,
well,
right?
Renee met someone, fell in love, and got married.
Okay.
So Una became a solo act, and she ended up opening for big singers like Rudy Valley and Harry Richmond.
Which is quite a coup.
Oh, it was, you know, she was kind of on her way in that world, but it was while she was working in these nightclubs, and this is interesting because she met and started dating a guy named Louis, and they called him Pretty Amberg.
Okay.
Which this guy was a Russian-born mobster. There's something about the beautiful women and the mobsters. It's just a magnet and steel.
Yeah, exactly.
So, you know, he would lavish her with gifts. They dated for a while, but he also had a short temper. One time he was insulted from the stage by comedian Milton Berle, and Amberg stabbed Milton Berle in the chin with a fork, causing the comedian to need 8 stitches. So this is the kind of temper we're dealing with her boyfriend.
So she's dating him, but then something happens.
It didn't end well.
It did not end well. October 23rd, 1935, Amberg is found naked and tied up inside a burned out car in Brooklyn.
It was a total mob hit. So when they were investigating, of course, our little Una gets called in by the FBI and questioned because she was the girlfriend. But, you know, she said that she only knew him as Mr. Cohen and that she had no idea what he did for a living. She went on to say that he was always polite and respectful, and they enjoyed horseback riding in Central Park.
Well, okay. Now, at the time of his murder, Una has another new name.
Yes.
Correct?
Yes.
She's now known as Rita Rio.
Yes. And she's gone to Hollywood. Actually, she was in Hollywood when Amberg was murdered.
Right.
So that was her alibi. She had gotten herself a small part in a comedy called Strike Me Pink in 1936, which starred Eddie Cantor and Ethel Merman.
Oh. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's a nice bump for her.
Exactly. So I think it was her film debut. And in it, she has this incredible dance number, which is available on YouTube if you ever want to Google it.
Okay.
She and Eddie Cantor do this number that's just fantastic.
Oh, yes, I saw it.
You really see the talent she had. I mean, she was very talented.
So as a publicity stunt, she's now passing as Latin full-time, forming an all-white, all-girl orchestra called Rita Rio and the Rhythm Girls. And It's really amazing to see her leading this orchestra
Well, it's
of
funny
women.
because
They've got their saxophones. And
if you think about it, you now have a black woman pretending to be Latina orchestrating an all-white band.
Yes.
It's the Rainbow Coalition with one woman.
Right. And they go on tour. They become pretty well known, right?
They do. They open for band leaders like Kay Kaiser. And they end up going to Hollywood where they make some musical shorts. These were those shorts they would show in front of the main movie. And one of the ones she did, she has this really fun number. It's this campy, fun song called Feed the Kitty.
Okay.
And we have a little clip of that Feed the Kitty number right here.
Please feed the kitty, oh mister, have pity on her. Meow. Please feed the kitty, so new to the city she'll purr. Meow. Come kitty, 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 nice kitty, 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 my pretty pet. Come kitty, 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 nice kitty, kitty, take all you can get. Oh mister, please feed the kitty, so new to the city she'll purr. Meow.
She was extremely talented. That was fun. So she's in Hollywood. She goes through a couple more name changes, correct?
Yeah, that girl changed her name a lot.
I know. Rita Novella, correct?
Which was her mother's first name.
Right. And she also reconnected with actress Dorothy Lamour, whom she had known from back in New York City. And Lamour, who is at this time an actress of some...
Oh, she was a star by then. And
right.
Yeah, this is a very important connection for Rita.
Right, Rita. Dorothy Lamour helps Rita get a screen test for the sarong-wearing bestie to her role in Aloma of the South Seas, which I have never seen.
I've never seen it either, but I want to try to find a copy of it just to see Dorothy and Rita doing their thing.
So now she's Rita Novella. She gets cast in this Dorothy Lamour picture, and the studio renames her Dona Drake, which is
finally a name stuck.
Right. Finally, this is the one that she ends up
from here on
living
out.
with. Okay.
She is Dona Drake. This is also when Paramount offered her a contract, and that's when the big biography came out saying that she was born in Mexico City, all of that stuff.
So this film that she's in with Dorothy Lamour, it is a box office hit.
Yes.
It's nominated for an Academy Award. And Paramount goes on to put her in a Bob Hope film.
Yes. It was a movie called Louisiana Purchase in 1941. And she actually has a great musical number where she sings the title song. And that's also on YouTube. So check that one out too. She's very talented, very fun.
And then apparently Bob Hope was rather smitten with her.
And who wouldn't be?
And who wouldn't
Look
be?
at her.
She's beautiful.
Yes.
So she was also in his next film, one of the famed road movies, Road to Morocco, with
Dorothy Lamour.
Dorothy Lamour,
her
and
old
of course,
buddy.
Bing Crosby. Yes.
And at that time, Drake was fifth billed, which was great for her.
Yes.
And she played an Arab princess.
So she's on the rise.
She
right?
definitely is.
And she starts appearing in nightclubs to help the war effort. She becomes a pinup favorite.
Yeah, she definitely was a pinup. You can see her in like Yank magazine and the Army Weekly. She's doing her part, keeping the morale high for those boys.
Right. She gets into another film with Marjorie Reynolds and Betty Jane Rhodes called Star Spangled Rhythm.
Yes, which was, basically it was Paramount's big glossy movie that every contract player under the sun was in it.
Sort of like That's Entertainment.
Exactly. After this, Paramount's excitement for their new Mexican Spitfire kind of began to wane a little bit. They cast her in a couple of pretty unremarkable films, one of them being this musical Salute for Three in 1943, and then one of the lesser Bob Hope vehicles, Let's Face It, which also featured Betty Hutton and Eve Arden. So then Paramount actually loaned her out to a Poverty Row studio, Monogram, which was kind of unheard of, and it was sort of the writing on the wall.
Right. She knew then, if they're loaning me out to a B studio, this is not looking good.
Right. And the movie she did for Monogram was called Hot Rhythm. And right after that, Paramount dropped her contract.
Mm-hmm. One of the quotes that you have of her, she took it all in stride, saying, "It was wonderful at first with Paramount. I thought I was on my way to becoming a film actress. But you can't make a screen career out of combing Dorothy Lamour's hair or chasing Bob Hope in one picture after another." What a telling quote.
Amen, sister.
Yeah, she's absolutely right.
But one good thing did come out of this B movie, Hot Rhythm. While she was filming it, her good friend Joan Blondell, who we love, introduced her to up-and-coming costume designer William "Billy" Travilla.
And he was quite a costumer.
Yes, he was. At at the time when they met, he was working at Western Costumes, which was the big costume house in Hollywood. And he would get his big break soon after that when Warner Brothers actress Ann Sheridan hired him to create her wardrobe for her films and personally.
And then he went on to be nominated multiple times for an Oscar, but won for designing the costumes for Errol Flynn's swashbuckling adventure film, The Adventures of Don Juan, in 1949. He also designed for every leading actress at the time and created, I just think this is amazing, created the most iconic dress perhaps that you can even imagine. The Marilyn Monroe white pleated halter dress that blew up her skirts in The 7-Year Itch in 1955.
Exactly. And, later in his career, he would go to TV, he'd win some Emmys, but he was a huge player in the costume design world. They married really quickly. I think they had a 10-day courtship. And soon after that, after these 10 days, they head to the Santa Monica City Hall and they're married August 19th, 1944.
And this brings up a really interesting point that you mentioned.
Yes. And I'm so curious about it. Did he know? Did Trevia know that she was a black woman? Or did he think she was a Latina woman?
Right. Because in 1944, it would have been illegal for a black and white person to marry, which is just outrageous when you think about it.
Right. And at this point, it's not just her career that's at stake. I mean, the stakes are so much higher. I mean, they could have been arrested. Right. And I can't find any documentation anywhere that really lets us know when Billy Trevia knew and what he knew and when he knew it and things like that.
And did he ever know?
And did he ever know? I don't know.
Yeah. And he had a lot on the line as well. I mean, yes, as you said, they could have been arrested, but his career could have been ruined as well.
Yeah, it's fascinating just what they had to live under during that time.
Right. So, as we said, she's free from her contract at Paramount, and she's about to enter into, as a freelance actor, one of the more exciting phases of her career. But before we talk about that, Steve, it's time for our Hollywood pop quiz.
Perfect. The question of the day is, I had mentioned Imitation of Life, the 1959 version, previously. It was originally made in 1934 with Louise Beavers and Claudette Colbert. The question is, who played the daughter, who was then named Piola, the one who breaks Louise Beavers' heart and denies her heritage? Who was the actress, and what did she go on to do?
All right. We'll be right back with the answer to that and more about DONA DRAKE after this.
Hey, Steve and Ann will be right back, but first another stop on the Hollywood tour. The shortest performance to win an Oscar for Best Supporting Actor was Anthony Quinn's 8-minute tour de force as the painter Paul Gauguin in Lust for Life. That was back in 1956. And the shortest performance to win an Oscar for Best Supporting Actress was Beatrice Straight. She clocked in at 5 minutes and 40 seconds with her performance in the 1976 film Network. Now back to Steve and Ann from Beneath the Hollywood Sign.
Welcome back, everybody. Just wanted to give a shout out to our listener of the week, Nikki Dukas. Thank you so much for recommending the film No Man of Her Own.
And this is a fantastic movie. Great choice, Nikki.
1950, starring Barbara Stanwyck. And here's just a quick synopsis. A pregnant woman adopts the identity of a railroad crash victim and starts a new life with the woman's wealthy in-laws. But she is soon blackmailed by a devious ex.
It's a great movie, and I really hope our listeners will check it out.
We left off with DONA having been released from Paramount. She's now a freelance actress, and what happens to her next?
Well, her career really has a nice upswing. She gets a nice supporting role with John Wayne and Claudette Colbert in the RKO comedy Without Reservations in 1946. And after that, she becomes a leading lady. She is opposite Kent Taylor in the 20th Century Fox B film Dangerous Millions in 1946, and she was featured nicely as the girlfriend of the Weasley Dan Duryea in Another Part of the Forest in 1948, which people may realize was the prequel to the classic Lillian Hellman story, The Little Foxes.
Yes, yes. And then she goes on to score the second female lead as the comic Gold Digger in MGM's So This Is New York, 1948.
Yeah, and she's actually playing Caucasian for one of the first times in this. She plays Virginia Gray's sister.
Okay. And she's back with Rudy Valley,
yes,
who she had opened for. So it was rare for her that she was playing a white woman.
Yes. And in her next movie, she ends up playing a Native American. So she's played Arab, she's played Caucasian, she's played Latino. Now she's going to add Native American to her repertoire. But she was in a great movie called Beyond the Forest in 1949, which was directed by the great King Vidor, and it starred Bette Davis. It was a very substantial part for her and a good break.
And she then goes on to do a comedy, The Girl from Jones Beach in 1949,
Yes.
with Ronald Reagan and Virginia Mayo. So not only is
Again, playing Caucasian in this one.
playing Caucasian, not only is she playing women of different ethnicities, but she's jumping from dramas to comedies. She's singing, she's dancing. I mean, she clearly has a wide range.
She does. And I think, though, even though she is perceived to be a Latina woman, there's still limitations on her.
Of course.
Because of the times. If you think pretending to be Latin in Hollywood, it couldn't have been easy because Latino performers weren't respected much more than black actors. Just ask Rita Moreno.
Yeah, I mean, she's a great example.
Yeah.
She's not only being asked to play what her ethnicity is, but she's asked to darken her skin and play something that she's not. Yeah.
And so even playing Latina, she's limited with how far she can go.
Right, in that time period.
Yeah, unfortunately. And while her career starts picking up steam, it seems her personal life is going in the toilet.
Well, and this brings up something that you have in your blog as well. This idea that if her husband didn't know, we know the public didn't know, the stress, the anxiety, I mean, that could make you sick.
Yes, and that's kind of what happened with her. She was diagnosed with this mild form of epilepsy. She started suffering emotional difficulties, which I can't imagine the pressure of trying to maintain the facade.
Yeah.
It must have been so stressful.
I know her husband is quoted as saying that she was one of those actresses who found it hard to come home and step out of the character she'd been playing all day, but I have to believe that the other side of her personal life was playing into that as well.
I think so. But happy times did come in 1951 when Trevia and Dona Drake had a daughter, a little girl named Nia. She was the apple of their eye. And, and I think that helped. She suffered from depression and it stayed with her.
So she takes a little time off from motherhood.
Yes.
And then she is starring opposite John Payne, who I love, in Kansas City Confidential, 1952, with John Payne and Colleen Gray. And she also has a flashy role in a film I've never seen called The Bandits of Corsica in 1953.
Yes, I've never seen it either, but again, I'd love to see a copy of that.
So she's now jumped to leading lady status, even though it is in B movies, right?
Yes. That's a huge career trajectory for her to now be having her name above the title. That's huge. As a leading lady, she ended up playing sensual senoritas opposite Keith Larson in Son of Belle Starr in 1953, and then opposite Rex Allen in Down Laredo Way, also 1953. Around that time, too, she discovered television, and she started appearing in shows like Superman with good old George Reeves.
And on television, was she also playing Latina?
Yes, always playing Latina. She also did Soldier of Fortune with John Russell, another TV credit she did. She was still doing movies, though.
So she appears in the 20th Century Fox adventure film Princess of the Nile with Deborah Paget and Jeffrey Hunter.
This time she's playing Egyptian.
Okay, yeah, all right.
I know. She had an identity crisis, I'm sure.
Yeah. So is that her final film?
It was. It was her final feature film. She did a few more TV appearances, but then she left the entertainment industry for good. And it was partly because of her emotional state. It began to worsen, and it was partly because of the strain on her marriage. I mean, the marriage was falling apart. In 1956, they separated, but they never divorced. They stayed together on very cordial terms for the sake of Nia, their daughter.
Do we know where Nia is?
Well, I do know where Nia is. Nia ended up, I think, moving to San Francisco, became a veterinarian, and sadly, she passed away in 2002.
Oh, okay.
Because it's funny, I wanted to kind of find her, because I would have reached out to her to see if she would talk to us, but she had since passed.
Yeah. They do appear together as a family on Groucho Marx's You Bet Your Life in 1960. Trevia was obviously very well known.
Yes.
What about Dona at that time? Was she still as well known as?
By this time, the career was kind of over. Her mental condition was worsening. He was the breadwinner. He was the star. I mean, she really had taken a backseat at this point. And at one point, I think it was 1967, she even sent Nia to go live with Trevia permanently so that she could deal with her epilepsy, her medical condition, and her emotional condition.
Okay.
But, nothing seemed to help her. She was definitely on this downward spiral of depression.
So by the late 70s, her health is pretty precarious. But she does appear at the 1986 Macy's Day Thanksgiving Parade.
I know. Isn't that great?
In New York.
I wish there was a YouTube clip of that. I'd love to see her final appearance because it was literally her final public appearance because she passed away June 20th, 1989 from pneumonia and respiratory issues.
So we don't really know when the full truth of her life came out.
It's a mystery. It's really a mystery. And like we said earlier, I don't know who knew what and when they knew it, which had to have been so stressful for her. And it's just a shame that that's what she had to do in order to have a career.
Right.
In hindsight, you look back on it and you just think, was it worth it?
Right. Was it worth it? I mean, we look at people like Louise Beavers, who we talked about in one of our previous episodes, who was relegated pretty much to playing maids.
Yes.
Did Dona Drake beat the system in a way?
I think the system beat her because you look at what happened to her personally.
Yeah.
It's another one of those sort of tragic stories.
Yeah.
She lived her dream, but did she really get to savor it?
I also think it's such a wonderful reminder that the times keep changing and keep improving.
Yes.
For people of all ethnicities in film and television.
Yeah, absolutely.
And which is why this story can really seem unreal and shocking because of today's lens that we look at things through.
Yeah. She did what she had to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's time for the answer to our Hollywood Pop Quiz.
And the question was, in the 1934 version of Imitation of Life, who played the daughter, the one who broke Louise Beavers' heart? And it was an incredible actress named Freddie Washington. And interestingly enough, Freddie Washington only made 6 films. She retired in 1937, and then she became a huge civil rights activist. She co-founded in 1937 the Negro Actors Guild of America, along with W.C. Handy, Paul Robeson, and Ethel Waters, and she was very active in the NAACP. She also was a theater writer and the editor for The People's Voice, a newspaper for African Americans.
Wow.
Very fascinating life, and actually there would be a great podcast just to talk about Freddie Washington. And so talented.
Wow. This has been a really eye-opening episode about Dona Drake.
And it's my hope that if you didn't know who Dona Drake was, you'll check out some of her movies, check out some of her clips on YouTube, because she absolutely deserves to be remembered.
Amen. We would love it if you would follow us on social media. Our handle is @FromBeneathTheHollywoodSign. And in fact, you'll find photographs of Dona Drake on our YouTube channel. Please subscribe to that, as well as Instagram and Facebook.
Also, as always, we love hearing from you guys, and we're starting to get great emails with great questions and great suggestions. So please feel free to keep those suggestions coming. You can email us at info@FromBeneathTheHollywoodSign.com.
That's this week's view.
From Beneath the Hollywood Sign.
You've been listening to From Beneath the Hollywood Sign with Steve Cubine and Nan McNamara, the podcast that celebrates amazing stories of Tinseltown from its golden era. Join us next week for another episode and learn something else about Hollywood you probably never knew. Take a moment and give us a 5-star rating and a positive review. And tell your friends about us too. It'll help grow the podcast. Visit Steve's website at FromBeneathTheHollywoodSign.com. The executive producers are Steve Cubine and Nan McNamara. Executive producer and post-production supervisor Lindsay Schnebley. This podcast is part of the Airwave Media Podcast Network. Visit airwavemedia.com to listen and subscribe to their other fine shows like The Box of Oddities and The Shallow End with Schnebley and Toth. Copyright 2024, all rights reserved. That's a wrap.